2, 3. Which ones are you guys working on? Oh, track 3. Interesting. Nice.
I think Himanshu is someone who was there on the, yep, he was there on the job portal for Metronome.
Okay, awesome.
Yep, nice.
Chapter 3. Nice. Track 1, track 3, track 2.
Recommend.
Recommended track 2, but chose track 1. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. A lot of people do that actually, Dhruva, because like if you see somebody has indicated that they have prior programming experience, we recommend starting with track 2. But a lot of people get curious about learning C++ by building games, and that's where they get interested in going with track 1 as well. So that's perfectly cool.
Where is this being live streamed? YouTube and LinkedIn, I guess.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, YouTube and LinkedIn, correct. Okay, awesome. So, okay, let me see if I have my web pages open for screen share. Okay, if you guys are facing any difficulty, any questions, just feel free to drop it in the chat. What we will do today is we will cover the topic for today, which is basically careers in the gaming industry. We'll talk about the careers aspect, and then towards the end, like always, like yesterday, essentially, we'll have an open Q&A. So folks who might have some prior commitments can jump off. We'll try to wrap up the core part of the session by 9, and then have an open Q&A for whoever wants to stay as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Just give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to everybody. If there's any questions, just let me know in the chat. We'll follow the same format as yesterday. You guys have access to pop open your cameras. If you want to ask any questions on voice, just pop open your camera, put your hand up in Zoom, and we'll give you access to unmute yourself. And that way we can interact with you guys as well and keep this session sort of very interactive. For those who might not have access to a camera or might have a very noisy background or something, please just use it, use sort of your chat as always. Yeah. Please talk about the business part of gaming. Sure. There will be some part of business today as well, especially if we get to cover a lot about the founders aspect of it, building game studios aspect of it, and things like that. Yeah. This is sort of more of a free-flowing conversation, right? So depending on how the questions come in, the conversation might take a different route as well. So please keep bringing in your questions as they come along. Yeah. All right, perfect. So Manas, can we share the link as well?
Yep, I'm dropping it in the chat right now. So I think, yep. So guys, this is the link of basically the topic we'll be covering for today. We're sharing this so that you guys have access to it even after the session has ended. So we'll be going through everything about the career opportunities in the gaming industry, and you guys can come back and refer to this link. And we'll make sure that going forward, you guys always have access to this link as and when you need it. So
yeah, perfect. I think Manas, we forgot to remove this. This is just duplicate of this itself. So maybe if you can just edit the space to remove this out. Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So welcome everyone. We'll just get started now without further delay. So welcome to day 2 of Launchpad. My name is Frank Rover. I'm the founder of Outscale. I have Manas with me, who's also an ex-alumni from our full stack game dev program, who's also been, in the industry before joining Outscale, before going through a full stack program. Then he went on to be in the industry again, and then he ended up joining back at Outscale to help us sort of grow the community and help us sort of take Outscale to the next level. So today we'll be talking about career opportunities in the gaming industry. The page will be accessible to you. There are a lot of good resources here. Don't get distracted. For now, let's just focus on what we are about to share here and be part of the discussion. You can go through the resources and the details shared on the page, after the call as well. Yep. There's a lot of helpful resources, and I'll come back to what this is. There's a lot of information here. So how you can make the most of it, we'll be sharing it towards the end of the call. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Perfect. So today we'll be talking about sort of like slight bit of differences and common sort of understanding of the different kind of roles that exist. And Manas and I will be kind of tag teaming on this as well. And the idea for today's session is to give everyone a very crisp overview about what kind of roles exist in the industry and how you can figure out which one is the right fit for you versus which one is not, right? So that's the core thesis. Along the way, again, use text, chat, video, voice, whatever it may be, to ask questions, and we'll keep the session very interactive. Okay. So broadly, if you look at it, right, we'll dive into each of these, but programming, artists, designers, producers, QA, which is quality analyst or testing, or can be, quality control, goes by different names. And then the last one being the founder, right? This is kind of an odd job. Doesn't fall into a very specific bucket, and we can talk more about it, right? So these will be kind of the different focus areas that we'll be talking about. So first one, we'll dive into programmer. I think this one, almost everybody sort of understand what it means to be a programmer. This can be referred to as a developer, programmer, coder, goes by different names, but all essentially are roughly the same. And if you're interested in Launchpad, if you're interested in full stack game development program, more or less you're interested in being a programmer, right? Programmer is probably the most sought after job opportunities in the gaming industry. Fundamentally, it's one of the highest paying job roles in the industry as well, has the most amount of demand as of today as well. So there's a lot going on if you are a hardcore technical person, or at least want to be a hardcore technical person and want to acquire this coding skill set, but apply that coding knowledge in the gaming industry as well, right? Because there's some part of this coding knowledge which is applicable to the broader industry, and there are certain parts which are applicable just to the gaming industry as well. Yeah. So as you can see on the picture, right, you can fundamentally sort of think about these vertical sections, such as joining the industry as a junior programmer, upgrading yourself to become an intermediate, and eventually sort of moving on to become more of a senior programmer, right? So how many of you fundamentally understand what does a programmer inside the game industry do? If you are, if you want to just get us on voice, just raise your hand and pop open your camera. Manas can give you guys access to unmute. Otherwise, if you know what a programmer does in the gaming industry, just drop it in the chat as well. I hope the question makes sense. So essentially, if you know what a programmer does in the gaming industry, let me know. We want to understand, what do you know about what a programmer really does? Sajad is saying, I think they program the requirements as per the game. Okay. They create the framework, code the game mechanics and the tools for the game dev process, programs, game mechanics. Okay. So we are saying, like, yes, we use the word programmer, we use the word coder, so we can think of, they code, they write code, they make programs, they essentially are writing software, right? Just that this software is nothing but games, right? Ram is saying, bring assets, sprites, sounds, etc. to life. That's an interesting way. Litesh is saying they are problem solvers, bring the game to life. Yeah, okay. Cool. So I think a lot of you guys tried to encapsulate, program the overall logic of the game. Okay, that's a good one, Vikal. So essentially, all of you are trying to sort of get to the same picture. At the end of the day, right, when you think about a programmer, they're kind of the glue that makes the entire game, right? So we'll talk about artists, designers, and other roles, but essentially every other role produces some part of the game. And in order for those parts to work together, right, that's what a programmer's job is, to make all those parts work together as the core game itself, right? So they will do problem solving, they will implement game design logic, they will implement new mechanics, they will implement whatever the designers tell them to implement. Somebody mentioned vector algebra development, they will do a lot of math, at least in games as well, right? They will do some animations, they will do some visual effects. Basically, essentially, whatever that you see on the screen, right, how it kind of works together is essentially a programmer's job, right? So that's why at the end of the day, programmers end up being the central unit for making the entire game work, right? So artists can produce some part of the game, the art assets. We'll talk more specifically about this. The designers will produce their own thing that they focus on, right? And so on and so forth. Sound people might create different sound effects and whatnot. Visual people will create visual effects, but all of these need to work together. For example, if a gun fires, right, there is some kind of an initial sound that needs to be triggered the moment the gun is fired, right? All of that glue basically is a programmer's job, right? So they do multiple things, but essentially their job is to make everything work together, right? That's the crux of it, right? And at the end of the day, their job is to make it work together in a way where the player is having fun, right? And that part, the second part of my statement, is the difference between building software versus building games. When you're building software, you're not thinking about, is this software fun for the user, right? You're just working on building that software to serve a core pain point for a user. For example, Uber, right? Your pain point is that I want to go to one place to the other. I would just want a car to show up at my doorstep, right? Is using Uber app fun? No, right? It's not fun. But that's the difference between games, and that's the difference between a programmer's mindset inside the games industry and outside the game industry. You don't need to just think about creating the best possible code and creating the best possible solution to the problem, but also in a way that it is fun and engaging for your user, right? And that's where your creativity as a programmer, as a coder comes in, right? Which is very unique to the gaming industry and does not happen in other industries. Yeah, so far any questions? Okay, don't see any. Did I miss any, Manas, in the chat?
No, there was someone who raised their hand in between, but I don't think they have it raised anymore.
Okay, cool. Cool. So yeah, just drop it in the chat if you guys have any questions. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. And if you want us to pause as well at some point, just let us know. Yeah. We want to keep the session interactive. So as you would expect, if you're just starting off, you'll be entering the industry as a junior programmer. The actual title inside different companies will differ, but fundamentally you're entering at a junior level, right? Here, what you can expect is that you will be given certain kind of problems to work on, right? And typically, if you're just starting off in the industry as a junior developer, your first steps, and I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, your first step would be you'll be given some bug on some existing project, and you'll be asked to start going through the code of that project and start solving for that bug. They just want to introduce you to the entire project. And this project might be like 10 people, 20 people, 50 people working on this project. So it will be a fairly large code. It might take you literally 2-3 weeks just to get a hang of how the project is even set up. Where is the starting point of the project? So for folks who might have maybe done some simple Flappy Bird kind of games, or would have done some decent intermediate level complexity kind of game projects before, right? If you're going into a bigger studio, right, this would be like literally 5,000 files. I'm talking files, right? And not even just lines of code, 5,000 different files of code that you have to skim through in order to understand where does my even code start, like where is the starting point of my code, and how does each part of code connect with the other pieces, how are these different functions working and all that stuff, right? It will take you a while to understand this because the game is going to be fairly complex, right? It's going to be large. There are maybe like 50 other engineers who are working on it, or coders already working on it at the same time, right? So when you're starting off as a junior, you are expected to first understand what is happening inside the game, and then basically be able to read code first, and then maybe do some basic bug fix. Or if you're really lucky, you might get a new feature to work on. Usually doesn't happen for a junior person on a big team. But if you're a junior person on a small team, you might get that opportunity where you jump in and you are presented with an opportunity to start implementing, a new, what we call it, like a new feature altogether, right? So that way you'll first start working on some design. You'll say, okay, I want to implement my code like this, and get that reviewed from a senior engineer on the team, and then move into actual implementing that code once you get that feedback, right? So here, that's why you need versatility in terms of having proficiency in different programming languages and different game engines, so that you are able to adapt to whatever kind of game environment that the company might be using. Okay. And as you can see, problem solving, strong math skills, knowledge of at least one game engine, at least just means like you have a good grasp on one and you can transfer that knowledge into another. All of these will become important. Yeah. So once you spend at least say 2 years or so, your skills would improve. You will get better handle on your coding languages. You'll improve with your communication when it comes to inter-team communication. Within the team, you'll be able to communicate better, with the other programmers, etc. as well. And as you sort of start to mature, you'll work on features and bugs that might that might translate into multiple people working on the same bug, right? Multiple people working on the same feature. For example, if you're building something like PUBG, right, you'll basically be able to implement, say, the full skins, right? Like you have all these skins inside PUBG and other games that you can equip on your character, the clothes and the equipment and all that stuff, right? Skins and hats, basically, right? All that stuff you can basically equip directly on your character. So that entire feature itself is definitely not a one programmer job, right? It will take a full team of programmers to do it, right? So once you start to mature into an intermediate programmer, you'll be given the responsibility to work in these small teams, and that way you can implement the entire mini feature inside the game itself, right? I call it mini just because it's a small part of the overall game, but in by absolute sense, it's not mini, right? So it's just relative, right? And then from there, once you spend at least 4 or 5 years in the gaming industry, you'll mature into becoming a senior engineer. And here the big difference is that you will be able to architect pieces by yourself and approve pieces for junior programmers in terms of what they want to implement, give them feedback, etc. Right? So here you'll be moving into a more mentorship role. Typically, the life cycle is like 0 to 2 years is junior, 2 to 5 years is intermediate, 5 years and above is usually you can consider as senior, right? And that too is like 5 years of solid hardcore coding experience where you can really understand the complexity of the game itself, right? So once you are a senior engineer, you will be doing code reviews for your juniors. You'll be giving them feedback. When you have to implement the same PUBG skins feature, you'll be the one who will be given the skins feature, and you will have 3, 4 other engineers or some X number of other engineers junior to you or at the same level as you working with you, and you're the primary person who's responsible for making the entire feature work, right? So you'll be learning some of the advanced concepts such as design patterns, the programming patterns that we talk about in track 3. All of that will come in handy, very useful once you transition into a senior role. But today, companies expect that you have knowledge and awareness about these at even junior and intermediate level role. That's why they are part of the advanced track in Launchpad, as well as advanced topics in full stack game development program as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So hopefully this makes sense.
Yep. I think I don't see any questions, but I do have one question. One aspect we did not cover is this. We've covered the life cycle or say the career graph of a programmer. We did not cover what different types of programmers exist on how you can actually go about finding a niche in the industry. So, do you guys know what kind of different programming positions there are in the industry? Like, for
Yeah.
example, there are 10 different systems going on in a game, but do you know what category different programmers fall in order to make that kind of a game? Again, you can drop the answers in the chat or feel free to like raise.
Yeah, just to make sure everybody understands the question, what are the different kind of programmers that exist in the industry?
Okay, gameplay, graphics, engine. Okay, outside of this, VFX. Okay,
UI, mechanics, okay, animation, sound,
network.
network.
Okay, finally someone said network as well.
Yeah.
One major thing I cannot see anyone saying is tools. Does anybody know what a tool programmer does?
Yeah, multiplayer, AI, UI.
Develop tools. Oh, what tools? I know they develop tools, but what?
UI, UX, graphics, yeah, framework.
Okay, to make game dev process faster. Okay, can you think of who would be the persons who would be making use of those tools or understanding how to use these tools? Yep. So yeah, level it. Yeah, exactly. So tool programmers, I think the rest are pretty well covered in the industry. Tool programmers are not talked about, or there's less awareness about what tool programmers basically do. So tool programmers basically, like someone was pointing out, their job is to facilitate the designer's vision, right, and helping them with tools in order to make their life designing or creating the game easier. So that's basically what a tools programmer does. Others, I think you're pretty familiar with already. So working with a team of designers, artists, creative people, etc. All of them don't necessarily need to know how to code. So your job as a programmer is to make their life as easy as possible. So for example, say an artist comes in and asks you to set up a system inside your engine that uh, import different art assets and animations in game. So it's your job to let them import things and see how they actually look inside the game.
Yeah.
And come talking about artists, I think we can move to the next.
I think before we move forward, is just one thing I'll add is like I know a lot of folks mentioned like UI, UX, AI programmer, multiplayer programmer, front end and back end as well, right? So essentially, all of the things that we just talked about fall under sort of the front end category. Back end is a completely altogether different beast in itself. So for anybody who is not familiar with the word back end, essentially all that means is that when you are working on especially a multiplayer game, right, or any game that has like a server component to it, right, that's where backend becomes important, which is the server that you are connecting to, right, and what kind of data it is trying to capture, how is it letting you give rewards such as you get new coins, etc., etc., right? Like even though a lot of these games like PUBG and Clash Royale and whatnot are all free to play, but you still need internet to play them, right? Even if they don't have like a real multiplayer component, you might have noticed they still allow you to not play without an internet, right? So a lot of these games are moving in the industry towards being multiplayer in some sense or the other, right? And that's where front end and back end is needed, right? So back end is something that you don't see, but essentially controls everything which is part of your game experience. How many coins you have, how much currency you can spend, what level are you on, all that, right? That data part is essentially what backend controls, right? And front end is basically what you see and feel on your device, right? My character running when I press the forward button, right? And firing and shooting when I interact with certain other buttons, right? All that is part of front end. And UI, VFX, and engine, and networking, and tools programming, all of that is sub part of front end. And as you go from junior to intermediate to senior, you'll sort of figure out what part of that particular domain you are excited about. Are you excited about writing network code? Are you excited about writing multiplayer code? Are you excited about writing C++ libraries to help speed up the process for all the other games, right? One good example that Manas was mentioning on similar lines is like, imagine games that are built for Android, iOS, console, PC, right? The artwork used in the game is the same, but in order to optimize the game for these different platforms, you have to compress these assets into smaller size assets so that they fit easily on devices, right? And the compression logic is different for every platform. Android will treat it differently, iOS will treat it differently, a PS5 versus an Xbox would treat it differently, right? So you have to write some tools in order for it to make it easy so that programmers or artists just throw in the assets and the system takes care of doing the custom compression for each platform, right? All of this is part of like tools and so on and so forth, right? You can call it like optimization engineer, tools engineer, etc. So the language or the title would change from company to company depending on how their internal organization is structured, but the core role that you will be performing remains the same. Yeah. So this usually happens as you mature in the industry and you figure out where you want to go, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I think we can move on to artists. Otherwise, we'll not be able to cover all of them. So, yep. Meanwhile, if there are any more questions on programmers, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Yeah.
Yep.
Paras,
Yep. I
you
will.
want to share screen?
Yes. I think you guys should be able to see my screen. Just let me know if you guys can.
Yep.
So coming to an artist, before I open up this toggle, I just want to understand outside of the graphic side of things, do you know what different kind of art exists in the gaming industry? Because the art side of things, I think a lot of people again are not really aware of. Has anyone ever tried their hand at art uh, in game development over here? Game character artists, environment artists. Okay, these artists we know, but has anyone actually ever tried creating art of their own? What kind of tools have you used or are familiar with in order to like get an idea of uh, how art is basically developed? Maya, Blender, Photoshop. Okay, usual suspects over here. So basically, say how we define the job of a programmer. Can you give me a short definition of what you think the job of an artist is? Again, you can unmute or drop it in the chat. But these different worlds that you're okay, draw, concept artist, okay, design, okay. So 3D modelers make the game visually good, make the game playable, okay, bring forth an idea, sketch, cool. So an artist's job will always vary depending on the kind of games that they are making, right? So in the industry, for example, if I'm working on a 2D platformer like Hollow Knight or Ori, for example, you'll see that most of these artists are who are working on the game are very good at 2D programming. So they might not be familiar with Blender, etc. And after that, outside of that, you'll see that they are good at Photoshop, for example, very good at Photoshop, maybe some spline tools that help animate these 2D characters, etc. So you'll see that for different job roles and different specializations, like Mayank was discussing, uh, all artists will always have a starting off point similar to programmers, but they do tend to find their niche very quickly, or at least they know what kind of art they are good at right off the bat. But in order to get a job as an artist in the industry, you'll always find that there is one thing that's paramount, that is a portfolio. You do not, if even if you don't have a good looking resume, the first thing that a company, when you apply for an artist position, is going to ask for is your portfolio. And that portfolio is exactly what you need to present and make sure that it looks kick-ass. So I'll just share one example over here. I think you guys should be able to see it. So this is an example portfolio of one of the candidates who had applied on our job portal, right? So this guy is specializing mostly in environment art side of things. So he was working with a very popular art-based studio in India itself, and they were creating environments for inside Unreal Engine for other studios, right? So his portfolio specializes only on 3D, and that is what he has highlighted. So creating different props, doorways, uh, example train tracks, etc. All of that is what he was focusing on. He had created machine, like you can see, guns, etc. And then you can see how his graph has evolved over the years. And this portfolio is basically hosted on different sites that you might be aware of, say Behance or ArtStation. uh, you can find a link to his portfolio down here as well. So if you click over here, you'll see that this is actually what his portfolio looks like. It's not loading for some reason. Yep, it's loaded up now. So you'll see that He's worked on all kind of things from vehicles to levels and environments, etc. And this is basically all that you need in order to showcase your skills to a company. Your portfolio looks good. As an artist, you have the potential to crack it in the industry. Now, in order to get this kind of portfolio, you'll see that he has already figured out what his specialization is and has worked actively towards building that specialization. So uh, this is what you should be striving for if you plan to get into the gaming industry as an artist. Again, it needs sharp command over tools. But if you say don't want to become environment artist, you want to become say an animator, or say you also want to specialize in 2D or concept art over 3D, the job role will differ. So for concept artists, like it might be as simple as creating a simple layout of a level, right? And that layout you need to imagine first before bringing everything inside an engine. So that is the job that would come inside an concept artist position. So all that stuff you need to take care of, plus have a good command of how, basically visualizing what the theme of the game is, what the vision of the director is, and bringing it to life. So that's basically all there is to it. If there are any questions regarding how art works in the industry, I'm more than happy to answer them right now, since we are running behind on time. No questions? Stop screen share. Should a programmer have a portfolio? Yes.
Yeah, I was about to mention that I missed mentioning this earlier, that even a programmer needs a portfolio. Just that the portfolio is something different, right? In case of a programmer, you're not creating a portfolio on sites like what Manas was just showing, right? ArtStation is a site for creating portfolio for artists. There is a very popular site for creating a portfolio for programmers. Can somebody name it in the chat? Yeah, Sam gets it right. GitHub, right? Essentially, as a programmer or as a coder, as a developer, right? Your job is to showcase your skills in writing good, clean code, right? Building games that work. You're able to integrate different things. So if an artist has created some 3D objects or has created some kind of a level like we were just seeing, right? You're able to take that and turn it into a reality inside the game engine, right? That's your job as an artist. And you should be able to showcase that via code, via actual implementation on sites like GitHub, right? There are other sites as well, but essentially some kind of a source control site that lets you host your projects altogether, and that somebody can directly look at to understand what kind of quality you're bringing to your projects and so on and so forth. Yeah. So how about designers? What is the portfolio? Itch.io. Let me come to designers. Designers is the next topic. So we'll just talk about designers in a minute. Okay. Good. So good question regarding the portfolio for programmers. And my apologies, I missed that earlier. Okay. Awesome. I don't think there are more questions, so we can quickly move on to the next part, which is designers. All right, so before I jump in, somebody shared their level design video a little earlier in the chat, which I just took a quick peek at. It was looking good. But before we jump in, what do you understand from a designer? Like, what does a designer really do? Who is a designer? What do they do? Anyone? And feel free to just raise your hand and pop on voice/video as well. Would love to hear other folks as well. Build characters, level design, create the game rules, provide a creative direction to the game. Okay, oh sorry, my bad. Like hopefully now it's visible. Like, I mean, don't read too much into the graphic itself. It's just here to give you a pictorial representation of what we're going to talk about. Just focus on either the chat and what we are just talking about, right? Work on lighting, level, etc. Okay. Story, game balancing, texture, storytelling. So you can see there's so many different answers, right? Texturing probably is not a designer's job. It's more of an artist's job. So apart from that, I think all of you got it right. That's one, like doing story, doing game balancing, working on levels, creating the rules of the game, building the characters, or at least the persona of the characters, right? All of that is actually part of a designer's job, right? And more balancing. Designers are the one who ideate the game, decide on the player, what the player will experience. Yeah, okay. Design how actual game will look like after completing. Okay. They're the ones maintaining the documentation and think about mechanics, etc. Okay, so more or less everyone is correct, but how do you sort of summarize this into a one line, right? That is to what does a designer do, right? So here's how you think about it. An artist creates what you see on the screen. Okay, so just listen carefully. An artist creates what you see on the screen, whereas a designer creates what you feel. That's the core difference in one line, right? So if you see some square, or if you see some triangle, if you see some level, if you see some gun, whatever you see on the screen, right? An artist has created that, right? But let's say if you play a game and it makes you feel sad because the story is very touching and emotional, right? So that feeling of sadness is what the designer's job is, right? The designer is the therapist here, right? So if a game makes you feel challenged, right? For example, the Dark Souls games and all, right? They're gruesomely hard and notorious for being very hard, right? That's because the designers wanted it to feel that way, right? If a game is very simple, right, and you can play it really quick, Flappy Bird kind of games, right? You can play it really quick, die really fast, and quickly get back into the game, right? That's what a designer does. They control the parameters of the game so that it makes you feel the game in a certain way, right? So that's the core of what design does, right? Now that can be reflected in levels, that can be reflected in story, that can be reflected in interactions, that can be reflected in dialogue, etc., etc. Sound. There are games that are completely pitch black and you only play with sound, right? It's nothing but sort of design of it, right? So whatever you feel when you play the game, that's the designer's job. Whatever you see that's the artist's job. When you press a button on the keyboard or your mouse or whatever, right? Whatever happens on the screen, right? That's a programmer's job. So your interaction with the game, right? When I say press F and I want my character to shoot and fire or whatever, right? That's the programmer's job to make that happen, right? So the programmer kind of sits in the middle. Artists make you see, designers make you feel, programmers integrate this too so that you get that experience. So hopefully now the three pieces are starting to make sense and connect together, right? So you can think of that like Call of Duty, certain level, at a certain point, a lot of people die, right? So now a designer's job, or at least a level designer's job, is to look at that level and say, okay, out of the 1,000 people that have played the same level around this corner of a building, all my players are dying, right? Or 80% of my players are dying. So this means that this is a very hard spot, right? Do I want to keep it the same way? Do I want my players to feel challenged and feel that this is a hard level? Or do I want to reduce the complexity of the enemies coming around this building corner so that less people die? Right? So designers tackle these kind of questions, right? We always think about, like somebody was talking about in the chat earlier, they ideate, they come up with the idea of the game. Usually that's not what a designer does, in at least in the industry, right? If you're working on a hobby project, as a designer, you'll be the one conceptualizing the entire game, because maybe it's just 2-3 people, indie project, you guys are working as a side project or something fun, right? But then in the industry, when there are big teams at stake, right, the concept of creating what kind of game is usually controlled by the business, right? That's not a single designer's job, right? A business itself determines that, okay, this is the kind of game that we want, right? And there are more reasons, and we can come back to, once we talk about the founder journey, we can talk more specifics about that. But essentially, the design, the concept of what kind of game we want. Do we want to build an endless runner game? Do we want to build a Clash Royale kind of a PvP game? Do we want to build an MMORPG game? All that is fundamentally controlled by business decisions rather than design decisions, right? And after that, basically, the designer's job kick in to make the player feel the way the game should be, right? Or whatever the team has decided it should be. Yep. Hopefully that makes sense. Questions? I think there was a good number of stuff in the chat that I totally missed. Anything?
I was just screwing with.
So yeah, Latesh is saying that should a designer be good at programming? Absolutely not. It's good to have a designer who can program, maybe somebody who has done programming for a couple of years and then realize that I want to be a designer because I enjoy that part of games more and can transition into a designer very easily, right? The benefit that it gives you is that when you're designing something, if you already have a programming background, right, then you already know what you can and what you cannot implement in code easily, right? So your ideas start to become programmer friendly and programmers will love you for it. Otherwise, designers will come up with these outrageous ideas most of the time that programmers will be like, we can't implement this in reasonable amount of time. It will take us years to implement this, right? So that's like this same concept. So it's a very good question, Latesh. The same concept applies to anything else. If you were an artist before and you became a designer, now you understand that if you're proposing some design element, okay, let's make this level like this so that we can make the player feel a certain way, right? Or maybe we can make the player get stuck at this point unless they collect or this reward, or unless they go to this monster and defeat or whatever, right? So you're talking about a concept, a feeling, emotion that you want the player to absorb, right? And that needs to be turned into art, and then that needs to be turned into code, right? So if you have knowledge of any of these domains before you become a designer, you can talk about that to the artist or to the programmer much easily, and they will love you for it, right? Because now you're able to come down to their level and explain them, right? Like, imagine you're a programmer and you know all code, right? And I tell you that, hey Manas, this jump animation that you have implemented in the game, imagine like a Mario game, right? If I am a designer, I would come and give you feedback like, this jump animation doesn't feel crisp. What the F is crisp? Right? How do I implement crisp in my code? Right? There's nothing like, you tell me fast, tell me slow, tell me high, tell me low, something like that. If you tell me that, okay, make this jump faster, make this jump slower, make this jump higher, make this jump lower. Like, if you tell me that as a programmer, I can implement that, right? But if you tell me as a designer, please make this animation more crisp, I don't know what the hell that means, right? Crisp is not something you can add in code. It's not potato chips, right? So that's where learning different aspects of the industry and different roles help you interact with other members on your team much better, and that's what makes you a more valuable member of the team, right? And this applies to any role. You can say that I was a programmer, then I became a designer. I was an artist, then I became a programmer. I was a designer, then I became a programmer, vice versa, and so on and so forth, right? Everything, like, the more knowledge you have about these other roles, the better it is, because now your inter-team collaboration becomes so much easier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a question in the chat. What should a designer's portfolio look like?
good question. Depending on what kind of a designer you're looking for or becoming, right? Are you becoming a designer who focuses on story design, on character design, concept, right? Dialogue, level, depending on what kind of a designer you're looking at, your design portfolio will accordingly change, right? So you might start with something what is called as a GTD. If you're looking at a generalist designer, right? Your design portfolio might start at a GTD level, which is nothing but a game design doc. It is nothing but a Google Doc or a simple doc that basically highlight how the game design. So we'll not go too into the specifics of game design, otherwise we'll run out of time. But the idea here is that you can fundamentally cover a little bit about what are you trying to emphasize as part of this game in your design doc, and then go into the details of it. Is there level-based system? Is there a storyline? Is there NPCs? All that stuff you can talk about inside that game design doc. Essentially, it's a doc that communicates your idea of the game and tries to articulate what are the special things about this game that makes it unique, makes it different, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on what kind of a designer role you'd be looking for, right? There are design roles such as currency designer, right? Or an economy designer, right? So in free-to-play games, currency and economy plays a very big important role, right? So there are literally dedicated designers that almost spend their entire time in Excel working on, okay, if I have a game where you can go from level 1 to level 100, how many rewards should you get at every stage? How many coins should you get at every stage when you level up as rewards? So that you don't feel that I just get a lot of rewards and I don't have a way of using or spending those coins, right? So there are very deep concepts around design as well that you can master as you sort of progress in your journey. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Are there other questions that I missed?
I don't think so. It's more related. I love to do both design and programming. Is working as an indie better for me?
Sorry. I missed this. What is this?
I love working as I love it
Ah,
working on design and programming. Is working as an indie better for me?
yeah, I think that's a good question. So if you want to do multiple skills, right? I think we touched on this yesterday a little bit. Going into a younger team, right? A startup or a smaller team will always give you this opportunity to explore multiple things together, right? So an indie project would be a good opportunity. Jumping into a younger startup with a small team will give you the opportunity to wear multiple hats, right? For not just design and program, you might be able to get hands-on on art or animation. At the end of the day, young startups would always be eager for having people take more ownership across the board, right? Because the lesser number of people, the more ownership that's distributed, the better the end product is. Because a lot of people understand what is happening in different parts of the game, right? So definitely an indie or a young startup route would be a good fit. On the contrary, if you look at sort of bigger game studio, the Ubisoft and the EAs of the world, they look at specialization, right? Even at the junior levels, right? If you're joining in as a programmer, you'll be pretty much doing programming itself. 3-4 years down the road, maybe you can talk about transitioning into a different role, but usually the process itself at bigger studios is much slower, right? So if you want to aggressively try out, even when you're just getting started, taking different internship in different roles would be a good way to get started. Doing some freelance opportunities in different roles, even at cheap or no pay, would be a good way to get started, so that you start to build experience and exposure and understand what is it that you really want to do, right? So trying these ways out, there is a concept of, I've posted about this on my LinkedIn a little while back. It's called um, permissionless intern, right? I don't know if anybody has heard about this, but stick around for the Q&A. Maybe somebody, if you guys can bring up the permissionless intern, we can talk about it in slightly more details at then. Okay. Is designing done always digitally, or there's some part of it which can be done on paper? Good question, Paul. Paulin or Pulan, I think, right? If I'm saying the name correctly. Like design can be done on paper, right? And most of the time, word of wisdom is that you first start on paper before you move to digitally, right? So you can think about what is the simplest way that you can simulate your game experience on paper, right? And then transfer it into a digital format, because creating a digital version is always more time consuming, because you need art, you need programmers in order for your game to transfer into something digital. Most of the designers won't have programming skills, right? So if you can create something by cutting out strips of paper, or like dices or cubes or something, right, to simulate some part of that core experience and test it out with real players. Basically, this part of building a game is fundamentally called prototyping. So you quickly create that, and then you can dump into actually turning it into digital, because iterating on it and changing your design when it's in paper stage is much easier and much faster. Yeah. Okay. Where can I start to learn designing? So designing is something that's slightly more intuitive, and I don't think you need to start off at any specific thing. A very good exercise here, guys, is for all of these things: design, art, programming, right? when you're playing games, a lot of you already play games, right? When you're playing games, take a moment to understand from whichever lens you want to look at it, whether you want to look at it from a design lens, a programming lens, an art lens, etc., right? Whichever you might be curious about, right? Try to think through that lens and see what has the designer tried to do here, right? What has the programmer made implementing here, right? Like for example, I can give you an example of Super Meat Boy, right? That game, you basically, every time you try to complete a level and you die, you leave blood splat along the way. And then you play the next level, you see the blood splat from the previous iteration of that same level, right? Because that game is fast, quick paced in nature, essentially what the programmer and the designer is trying to do is give you a history of every attempt that you've made and failed, so that next time you can improve and try new things and you don't have to keep it in your mind, right? And that's a very small thing, but that has a very big impact on how you play the game, right? Because it might take you 20, 30 attempts to clear one small level. Each level completion might take you only 25 seconds, but you might have to play that level 30 times over in order to clear it. So now you see a trail of like previous iteration attempts, right? So these things you have to try and break it down in your mind a little bit, right? And that way you'll start to understand how does, you have to put yourself in that shoes and say, okay, why did this designer do it like this? What were they trying to do, right? And then just Google up a little bit about that game or design. You'll find some good articles about it. You'll start finding YouTube videos of breakdowns about it, etc. And that's probably the best way to get started, by intuitively training your brain to work on this rather than going by some book or something, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's not a very straightforward way. Like I would have loved to point, right, okay, go watch this tutorial or something. But unfortunately, these things need to be trained in your mind more intuitively versus, just following some standard recipe, right? Manas has dropped in some examples, like GDC Vault is a very good resource that's available. There are a bunch of other folks that do a lot of game breakdowns as well, and design breakdowns. I think I'm blanking out on the name of this popular YouTube channel that I follow. I think Mark is the name of the guy. I'll try to find the link and share it with you guys in Discord later. But he does GMTK. Yes, thank you guys. If for design, if you guys are interested, you should watch that channel as well. Very intuitive, breaks it down, and that's the kind of skill you want to build internally, right? So that you understand what game design is all about. Yep. Good. I think GMTK is probably proper because a lot of folks just threw that name out the moment I mentioned it. So good to see. Awesome. So yeah, cool. Hopefully this makes sense for design. We probably can take up more questions in the Q&A. We're hitting up on the time limit. So we still have production, QA, and founders to do. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll skip these three for today. We'll cover this in another day during Launchpad, or at least we'll try to. The schedule is fairly tightly packed for Launchpad. So we'll try to come back to producers, QA, and founders. But I just want to take a few minutes to talk about this section at the bottom of the page as well. So what this section is, over the course of last 3-4 years in Outscape's history, we have hosted a lot of founders, industry leaders, engineers, producers, designers, and we have hosted them for a lot of different kind of conversations across the board, right? Some metaverse related, some Web3 related. So you can find a lot of good resources from these conversations. You can see like Encore Game, Nazara, Manish is the CEO of Nazara, Vashvik is a senior engineer in EA, Ankush is the founder and CEO of Jungli Games. So you can see a lot of different conversations. Soumya is currently a Zynga producer at, I think her recent job is currently at Zynga. Previously, she was with EA and GSN. She started off as, I think, a designer and then later turned into a producer, if I remember the conversation clearly. So you'll find a lot of these folks who have started in some role and then migrated into something else as well. Joseph, Oliver, all of these are founders. So you'll find a lot of diverse, really good, interesting conversations. So pick the topic and then you can dive in there. Can you share the link? Manas, I think if you can share the link once more in the chat, that will be helpful. Yep. So you'll find a lot of good resources. These are all sort of videos available on Outscade's YouTube channel. So even if you don't find the link here for some reason or the other, you can always just directly jump into Outscade's YouTube channel and look at the playlist there as well. Yep. So this is going to be kind of like your condensed resource that you can continue going through, not something that you need to go through in the next couple of days, because each of these conversations is at least 45 minutes to 60 minutes long. I would say pick the ones that you feel more excited about. If you want to know about founder's journey or engineer's journey or designer's journey and those kind of things. So pick your conversations accordingly and let us know if you find those helpful as well. Yep. Good. So we're just about to hit on the time limit. I'm happy to take up any questions, but we'll try to come to founders, producers Q&A on some other day. So I think the engineers one usually ends up running for quite long. So we didn't get a chance to talk about business. I forgot who has asked regarding the business side of it. Apologies there. Business part we usually get to talk in the founders perspective. Happy to do that in another call.
Yep. Just to add on it, I am sharing another link in the chat. This is basically just a simple feedback for how the session was today. So just fill it up. It's anonymous, so if it's doesn't matter if it's positive, negative, just share that feedback across, and we're more than happy to incorporate it in our sessions going forward. So would love it if you could fill that up for us as well. And yep, I think we can move on to the outro. So people.
Perfect.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome, guys. So I think what we'll do is we'll quickly do our outro. In that case, after that, whoever wants to drop off can. So I would request everybody to just pop open your camera. We'll do the Outscale yoga. You can open up your camera. You can open up your mics. Let me see, unmute. Yes, you guys can do that. I think a lot of you were not able to participate yesterday, but would love to see more participation today. So for those who might have already joined us for the outro yesterday, would know what I'm talking about. For those who might be new, this is a quick 10-second activity that we do at the end of every session. So we'll do it quickly. And after that, I think what we can do is we can quickly remove this thing, gallery view. Yeah, so just switch over to the gallery view. Are you guys able to not open the cam or something? Because I'm not seeing a lot of folks jumping in. So just request everybody to pop open if you can.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, Vignesh, I can see Latish, I can see Vikalp. All right, perfect, awesome. So Tushar, Rahul, awesome guys. So unmute yourself. Everybody knows the drill. Hands up in the air. For others who can't participate, would request you guys to participate in the chat. Okay. So for folks that are joining us for the first time, move your fingers really fast. All our programmers here. Anu is like super in the dark. Seems like I'm watching a scary movie or some shit. I don't know what exactly, but okay, cool. Awesome. So on the count of 3, I think you guys know the drill, right? Remember? Yes. Anybody who can give me the cue? What happens on 3?
Go team.
Go team.
Yeah, perfect. All right, awesome. So 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go team.
That was very slow and dud. Didn't feel the energy today somehow. I don't know why. All right, one more time, quickly. Right, let's make the neighbors wake up and the dogs scream. All right, all right. 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go team.
Awesome. I can see a bunch of go teams in the chat as well.
Go
That's
team.
awesome. Okay, that was super delayed for some reason, but awesome. So thanks again for everyone joining in for today. Hopefully this was something that you guys got to learn something new as well. Thanks for everybody who participated. This is helpful for us to. And sorry, Vignesh, I think there's some background noise, so I'm just putting you on mute. Sorry about that. But cool. So we'll continue the Q&A session. Manas will be here for another 15-20 minutes or so, taking up questions. I need to jump into another meeting at 9, so I'll be jumping off. But please share the feedback. It's always helpful for us to improve and continue to be more value add to the community. And would love to take up any questions either here. Manas will immediately answer. If you're facing any issues related to accessing course material, resources, Discord, anything, feel free to ask Manas right now. If not, like definitely use Discord for that as well. All right. Perfect, guys. Manas, over to you. I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right. Take care, guys.
Okay, thanks, Mayank. I am going to remove permissions to unmute yourself. In case again you have any questions, feel free to like raise your hand, put on your camera, and I'm more than happy to answer those at the moment. Same drill as yesterday. Can I get course material? Yes, everything is there on the master page. Let me just share the link with you. Just give me 1 second. Plus, if you were not able to join yesterday, you can watch the recording over here as well. Sorry, I think I only sent it to Latesh. Latesh has a question. Is it okay if I'm not able to complete the track within these 15 days? It's okay, but again, then your eligibility for the full stack program, if you're interested in the full stack program, that is, might take a hit. So I would highly encourage you to like finish it in the 15 days. How to break into the game programming as a fresher? I'm finding it hard to find jobs in India. Simple answer to this: make games. Make as many games as possible. Don't stick to the same kind of game again and again. So don't keep making like different variations of platformers. Push yourself to make different game mechanics, write more scalable code, and basically debug your own code and understand how you can do things better. So unless you try it and do it and build your solid portfolio, you will probably not be able to get a job in the industry. Scholarship. Okay, I think Himanshu's question was regarding scholarship. Okay, yesterday you had mentioned that for top launchpad program students, they can get scholarship. I wanted to know that part. Apart from submitting assignment, what more can we do? Show up for the mentor sessions. Be active with within the mentor sessions. If there is some, if we basically notice that you're putting in the efforts, etc., right? And basically we think you're passionate about getting a job in the industry and actually learning after joining Outscale. That is basically all we are looking for. We are not looking for anything major or anything else. Can you elaborate on how the portfolio should look for a game designer? Okay, I'll just screen share and try to give you a peek at what a designer's portfolio should look like. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so this is just one example. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. So this is another guy who had applied on our job portal, right? So these are the different kind of games he had made, and it's a basic. The basic idea is give them a sneak peek of what kind of game you built and a link to actually view the GDD, for example, and a playable link to the game is like amazing. So if I can see the game and then actually directly hop into the same, there's nothing like it. So apart from that, like this link, you'll see that they will always have something like an itch.io link, for example, that or a link to downloading the game and actually playing it, etc. So this is basically what a normal designer's portfolio looks like and how they actually go about presenting their projects. They might also include their different game design documents as to how they actually think the game is supposed to play, etc. So this is just a example. If you want, I'll drop a link over here. You can take a look at that later. Cool. Lots of other questions. Okay, what are the languages we must know? C++, C Sharp, and C, like I mentioned before. And On what platforms can I find jobs in India? My focus is on finding opportunities rather than what I need to qualify for the job. With this question, I'm mentioning India for offline. I don't find remote jobs. Okay, so for people who are looking for a job, we already have a job portal. So if you have gone on our site, outscale.com, you'll see that there's a job portal section as well where you can apply for jobs. So if you already have the kind of skills that are needed, uh, feel free to apply on the portal. We'll see your profile and decide whether you're good enough to be shortlisted for any of our partner companies. Sorry. Creating games along with documentation. Yep. I'm trying to do track 2 at a time just to learn. Should I just stick to one track? Uh, Latish, I would highly encourage do one track at a time. Don't do two. So if you are in track 1, it's fairly short, so you can breeze through it quickly, finish that off, and then move to another track. Because every track needs some prerequisites that you're going to learn in one of the previous tracks. Can I become both a programmer and a 3D artist? Interesting. So there is a kind of a middle ground over here. So if you have you ever heard about this profile called like technical artist? So a technical artist is someone basically who is good at both. So a technical artist can take care of bringing in different animations or creating a tool that integrates Blender into Unity, for example, and creating different VFX, uh, creating different effects inside the engine by playing around with shaders, etc. Because shaders internally also require some code under the hood, so that also you can take a look at down the road. Again, that is a very high in demand job at the moment, so if you can go on and become a technical artist, there is a lot of opportunities in the industry right now. Okay, off topic question. What type of designer do you classify Hideo Kojima as? Okay, that is a question who, see, I'm not from a game design background, right? I've always been a tech guy, will probably always be a tech guy. So I won't say I'm very creative at all, to be honest. But if you were to ask me, like looking at the legacy, he's more of a storyteller versus like a gameplay mechanic designer. He's mastered the art of building different worlds and creating different characters that stick with you over longer times. So I would still classify him as someone who's very good at building worlds and writing good quality stories that actually fit inside the narrative of a game. Uh, but he could easily transition into more of a movie director role if he wanted to. So just to add on that, Neil Druckmann, like if you have been following him, the director behind The Last of Us, he actually did direct one of the episodes that inside the Last of Us TV show in HBO as well. So these guys are very creative in the sense that they know how to create different worlds and different stories along with actually creating games. So they had like a separate director for actual gameplay. Neil was taking care of only the story and the world. Which type of game we will learn here? Block game, puzzle game, or strategy based game? In the mentor sessions or inside the tracks? Aditya. Nice, Sajal. Again, if you guys can unmute and come on video, that could be better as well, because putting your questions in chat normally might take too long for you as well. No questions? Aditya, just to add on your question, so In the tracks, the games are already defined, right? Track 1 is a text adventure game. Track 2 is a Mr. Block game. Track 3 is a battle time game. But in the sessions, we are probably going to discuss, like if you've gone through the master page already, we are going to discuss everything from Candy Crush to CSGO to Hitman, etc. No issues, Sajal. Any other questions, guys? You can only become a game designer once you have enough experience as a developer. Not really, Ram. I wouldn't uh, uh, put it like that. If you want to become a game designer, you don't necessarily need to be good at programming, like Mayank was saying. It's an added advantage if you already know how to code, but you can directly get into game design without having any coding knowledge. So over there, the skills would then be knowing how to write a GDD, knowing how to put your point across with other team members, say programmers, artists, etc., and knowing how to put your ideas into notes or on paper so that other people can also understand what you're trying to build. Cool. Why is it so hard for India to produce a AAA game? It's basically a mix of the industry not having a lot of experience, I would say, and it's a mix of, we're still in the nascent stages of how we are going about things right now. So we will get there eventually, but and we'll see that teams are already on track to build the next AAA games, but it's going to take some time for sure.